My name is Julia Feirtag. My husband is Jim Feirtag, and he's the senior pastor of Parkgate Community Church here in Pasadena, Texas. How does a well-balanced compensation package affect the well-being of a pastor's family? Most churches love their pastors. Most churches love their pastors' families. Unfortunately, a lot of times a pastor's family may be going through stress that is financially related. Long-time financial strain often affects families by loading them with different kinds of stress. And a pastor's family is a very unique position. My husband and I have been in ministry since 1997, and we have definitely been through the ups and downs with finances. I'd like to say that right now we are very happy in our current situation, and our church does a wonderful job taking care of us. But there have been times where we struggled a lot because of different things that came up. Just as a personal example, we had a house that we could not sell. We moved from Alexandria, Indiana to Pasadena, Texas in 2003. And we did not get under the burden of that mortgage until last year, which was 2015. So that was a very difficult financial time. We had some renters who did not pay for several months and then left the house in disarray. And we had a very difficult time giving our children Christmas presents that year because we simply had no extra money once we paid for the mortgages and the damages that were done to the house. So this is something that's very near and dear to my heart. And speaking as a pastor's wife, I know that these things actually happen. One of the most common things I hear from other pastors' wives is questioning God and questioning the call to ministry. And there is this belief that if God wants me to do ministry, God is going to take care of me. And that's not necessarily wrong. However, when we are in the throes of ministry and there are stresses coming at us from all angles, and one of those stresses is money, it's very easy to stop and say, but wait, God, I thought you were going to give me what I need. And sometimes what we need is a little different than what God thinks we need. But that's very difficult as a pastor's family to go through that. A lot of times we end up being pessimistic toward the church and angry toward the church, specifically when we cannot provide things for our children like we would like to. My children are in their early teens, and they have a lot of expenses right now. I don't expect the church to give us more money because my kids cost more, but I can see how it would be very easy to be angry if those things can't be provided for. As a spouse, it is not my duty to raise questions and concerns about the finances with our church board, with our church leaders. If my husband doesn't feel like he can go and talk about our financial issues, then I have nowhere else to go. My husband is the go-between between me and the church board and those who make financial choices. So as a spouse, there's a very difficult feeling of powerlessness there. And many spouses can feel like that is an overwhelming crutch. Ultimately, it's easy for a spouse and spouses' families to feel a sense of depression and a real shame over these questions that are being raised, over thinking that God's not taking care of me and I must be doing something wrong, and maybe the church doesn't love me as much as I thought they did. That can produce a lack of energy. That can produce a lack of ministry. A lot of spouses simply go through the motions. And I think that that's where it gets to be dangerous. Ultimately, long-term financial strain creates doubt on whether or not a pastor can remain in ministry. A recent study of Church of God pastors showed that 73% responded that living out their calling in ministry is a concern because of financial strain. They're just not sure that they can make it any longer. Lessening that financial burden increases well-being for the families across the board. It looks like having healthier spouses and children, physically healthier, emotionally healthier, good decision making, and a more pleasant environment in the home. If the husband and wife are not at each other's throats when it comes to finances, everything goes a little smoother. And anyone in any walk of life can relate to that. A spouse with more creative energy and more energy just by itself is going to help the pastor so much more than a spouse who's depressed and drained of energy. We're looking at the complete opposite. When a pastor has to take care of his home or her home, as well as the church, that does create a lot of stress. And lowering that stress too is very helpful. A spouse has more resilience and can see a thriving ministry in their church, and they can also own the ministry. It's much more fulfilling to look at the church ministry and say, I'm a part of this, when you're not bitter or depressed or angry at the church and the church leadership. And I'm not saying that that happens all the time, but that does happen, and it does hurt ministries, and it does hurt churches. Once again, what we long to see are healthy pastors who are pastoring churches that thrive under good, solid leadership. And one of the best ways to make that happen is through good financial compensation. Thank you.